make shapes which aren't decoration, because in this, decoration becomes substance. The strings become some kind of wash of background, rather like in a watercolor. Very detailed, but not always clear to the ear or eye. The use of little flecks of color, the use of harps, which don't impinge themselves on your consciousness. All this is completely new. The idea that colour could be a form in itself must have seemed, at the very least, slightly sinful, and at the worst, desperately revolutionary. And indeed, there was revolution going on in Paris in the early 1900s. Where many of the world's most talented painters, poets, writers, dancers and musicians had congregated. The boundaries between the arts were becoming more and more blurred, and the dark colours of the 19th century were being crowded out by the rainbows of a new age.
Now when we hear this music, we don't really feel, oh, what is this? It's, we are used to this kind of sounds now. Now we are in the 21st century. But when you think about the time that was being first heard in the beginning of the 20th century, this was really revolutionary music. Another thing about the 18th and 19th centuries, the phenomena of music was something that you used every day. Music was something that was that was used for everyday use. It wasn't something, yeah, it was for the maybe you know, elite classes, maybe aristocratic classes. But towards the end of the 19th century, there were, especially from the beginning of the second part of the 19th century, the big public concerts had been started in Europe, in big cities like Vienna and Paris and London and Berlin, for instance. And whatever was composed contemporarily, the contemporary composers, for instance, Mozart, composing a symphony, was played next week in a concert, and it was accepted by the audience. The audience was not revolutionized, or they weren't scandalized or anything. Maybe Beethoven's symphonies, when they were first performed, were a little bit, you know, too much for us, too much noise, you know. This sort of comments were heard in Beethoven's music, but still, in Beethoven's time, whatever he composed was consumed next week, next month. Creators, the painters, it was the same thing for the painters also, or writers. If you wrote a book, it was published, and then it was read, and everything was consumed at the time of the creation, during the 18th century and 19th century. And there wasn't much surprise from the public when a new work was heard. But the interesting thing was this: after the Industrial Revolution, many uneducated people, the uneducated masses, also wanted to be part of the society. They also wanted to hear music. They also wanted to go to the concerts. So there were special concerts for the laborers and for the general public who were not aristocrats or high bourgeoisie. That meant that the audience capacity was getting bigger and bigger. That meant a sort of starting, that really started a traditionalism. Audiences wanted to hear the kind of music that they were used to. They were not open to new things, to new experiments. But what we have in the beginning of the 20th century is that the creators of music and the painting and dance, whatever, were really full of ideas, and new revolutionary ideas, actually. And they wanted to change. They hated traditions. They don't want to be tied down with traditions. So what we have in Vienna, for instance, at the turn of the century, we have a movement which was called secessionists. Secessionists meaning division, in a way. The painters, architects, designers were against the academia, against the traditional kind of art. One of the first buildings of the secessionist movement was this building. Go on. The group of people who started this secessionist movement, one of the founders was this painter called Gustav Klimt. He was a very interesting, eccentric painter, and at the same time he was a designer. He was he was artisan. He was an artisan. For instance, he would make wall paintings, also portraits, but architectural paintings also. He was one of the first artists of the group. This painting of Gustav Klimt, for instance, is a very famous one. I mean, he used textural elements in his painting, which was very ornamental and very scandalizing at the time. And he liked using nude. Yes? And this is The Kiss. Maybe you know it. It's a very famous painting of Gustav Klimt. Go on. Another portrait of Gustav Klimt. And this Joseph Hoffmann is one of the most important architects of this movement, the secessionist movement. And let's see his building. Not only buildings, he also designed furniture. This is his very, very well-known kubus armchair. It's very modern. You can still use it. Very comfortable. Okay, This is his Villa Primavesi in Vienna. Well, at that time, this project was considered revolutionary. Another founder of the secession, Koloman Mozart, he was a designer mostly, and he designed posters and all sorts of utilities. He even designed cutlery, you know, for eating, forks and knives and things. Yes, his posters for different exhibitions, yes. Now, through this secessionist movement, another idea was born, which was called Vienna Workshop, Vienna Werkstätte. This is their logo. It's a very well-known logo. Vienna Werkstätte was, again, a revolutionary idea for art, any kind of art. Architecture, sculpture, painting, design, all sorts of design, furniture design, and whatever, all kinds of shoes, vases, everything. Go on. For instance, yes, cutlery. They designed forks and knives and spoons. Go on. Vase, you know, sort of like this, 2 hands. And shoes. Egon Schiele. He is one of the founders of the Wiener Werkstätte. Egon Schiele was quite different from Gustav Klimt. Gustav Klimt was a sort of quite elegant and erotic painter. Egon Schiele is almost the opposite. Every single painting, portrait of his is very grotesque, and his portraits of women and men are sort of sickly, in a dilapidated way of living. It shows that kind of living. For instance, let's see his own auto-portrait. His nudes are not erotic. His nudes are even a little bit pornographic, you know. He shows all the, body parts in such a way that really are shocking, you know. If you're living in 1900, you would look at this painting and say, "Ay, what is this?" And you will get out of the exhibition, maybe. Yeah. For instance, this lady, reclining woman with green stockings. She looks dirty even, right? But Egon Schiele was a very, very important artist. Go on. Another self-portrait of Schiele. Now, Arnold Schoenberg, he also was a painter himself. And they, for instance, Schiele painted Arnold Schoenberg. Oskar Kokoschka, again, one of the members of this group. Oskar Kokoschka was a painter who was quite different from the others, Egon Schiele or Gustav Klimt. He was more expressionistic.